Hi, Amanda. How
Hi,
are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys today?
Yeah, we're doing very well. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us. We're so excited for you to be our first guest on this video LinkedIn interview that we're doing. We're so excited to have you here. So I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and let us know who you are.
Yeah, I would love to. And thanks for having me. I love to be the first guest. That's really fun. So, a little bit about me. I've been in data management for almost 25 years now. So, I've been doing this for quite a while. I've kind of had a lot of roles in data management. So, whenever I think about data management and my career path, I really started at the very kind of lowest point that you can start. At the time, I was actually standing at a copy machine making working copies because everything was in paper. It's been that long that it's quite dusty. So I made working copies. I became a data entry specialist. I started doing all sorts of roles between that data manager. I was a clinical programmer, medical coder. I did any and everything in data management until I started getting into leadership roles where I was, manager of data management, eventually a director of data management. And, now I'm kind of just doing my own thing. So it's really exciting.
And I think what we want to learn, especially in this market, is how can people go into the market within data management? What does that look like? What did that look like for you? Do you know what I mean? Especially within the CRO world, biotech world, sponsor world, there's a lot going on at the moment that people are really trying to navigate and, find either their first job or the second job or change career paths. Like people are always asking those questions, and it's good to hear from someone like yourself. So how did you start your career in data management and work your way up to a director level of clinical data management?
Yeah, I think for me, I worked with a recruiter whenever I was very, early in. I just jumped
We
in
love
with the recruiter. Yeah.
that.
They said to me like, "What can you do?" And at the time, for me, I was actually in college, and so I said, I don't know, right? But I knew that at the time I was, going to school for something that was science related. I really wanted to be in an industry that would support kind of knowledge and understanding of science. I really loved medicine. I was, just kind of trying to go that trajectory. So when they said, we kind of have an interesting thing for you here, it might just seem at first like it's very entry level, but we think that it could progress into something. And so once I got in the door there, it was one of those things that I thought like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense for me. And I feel like a lot of people, ironically, in data management, don't necessarily go into it for data management, right? They might have, I mean, some of the best data managers I've ever worked with have like a political science degree, or they have a degree that's not necessarily in a science field,
Yeah.
but they understand how to work with data. They understand the why. They understand to ask questions. And sometimes it's just about finding the puzzle pieces that go together in the data. And that can actually bring you into data management. So I think people don't need to be scared about, oh, I don't have just a science degree, so I can never do data management. Because sometimes if you really find an entry level position, you can pivot and learn a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And when you first started, did you start your career did you go into a CRO? Did you go into a biotech? What was the kind of first step for you?
Yeah, for me, I started in a CRO.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a mid-sized CRO. And I think one thing about that that's really important too, whenever people think about acquisitions and how they work and how they happen, it can feel really nerve-wracking, right? But I think in this industry, it's really been streamlined in a way that people shouldn't be fearful of acquisitions anymore. They should just watch what's happening in the market, see where they're going, try to understand exactly where their role fits into their new space, and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think, the most thing that people are always looking at is like, okay, I want to go into data management. Do I want to start? And I guess this is more of a personal preference than it is advice, but like, did you enjoy going into a CRO, or were you thinking like, I want to go into a biotech? Do you have a preference when it comes to that, where to start if you were, starting new?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, I was so grateful that I went the CRO route because there were so many different opportunities for me to learn new things, which
Mhm.
made me feel like I had a lot more experience in a shorter period of time. I didn't
Okay.
become siloed immediately, which can happen. It's not intentional, but sometimes on the sponsor side, if you hop right into the sponsor side, you kind of have a niche on the sponsor side, right? You have a very specific role there. For a CRO, you might work with 5 or 6 different sponsors who all have a different idea of what they would like or how they would like it. And so you kind of learn a different way, and it doesn't just have to be so black and white. So for
Yeah.
me personally, I liked that. I liked gaining all of that experience. And also at a CRO, the one I was at the time was a little bit smaller. So
Mm.
they needed me to perform more tasks. So I was working as a data entry specialist, but they also were saying, oh, you know what, we'd like to teach you clinical programming because we need that sometimes, right? And while you're doing that, you know what, oh, we need a medical coder because she's not available anymore. So
Yeah.
it really gave me a depth of knowledge that I'm not sure that I would have in the beginning had at the sponsor side at that particular time.
With the changes in the market and everything that's been happening, what trends or challenges in clinical data management do you see kind of shaping the future of the industry?
Yeah, I think some of the things that we should really keep an eye on is this is I think always been a trend, but I think it's one that's become really clear lately is the communication style that CROs and sponsors are looking for. I think sometimes people believe that it can be adversarial, but I don't think it has to be, right? And
Mhm.
so I think if you can be collaborative and be a partner both ways, things can be so successful whenever you have these relationships and how the market goes. So, if you're thinking about your team and you're thinking about the communication style you should choose, it should really be something along the lines of how can I make sure that I'm being proactive, I'm not being reactive, that I'm making sure that I'm bringing solutions to the table. And when we start doing that, we start seeing that collaboration happens a lot more often. Sponsors are more willing to give CROs more contracts because they're seeing that the communication is working. They don't have to only be the subject matter expert, but they're
Yeah.
getting that in return. So I think that happens. That means that you continue to see great growth on your CRO side. However, I know that there's been some downturn in the market lately, right? So there's been some, turnover. A lot of companies have kind of definitely, we can't avoid the elephant in the room that they've kind of right sized left and right lately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I know that's really scary for people, but I think that also means that we're kind of taking a shift in a trend to a bit more FSP models. People are looking for smaller, they're not looking for large conglomerate CROs as much. They're definitely looking for that one source of how can you be more nimble? How can you be more efficient? How can you provide me the things that I need in this moment and not a big chunky clunky kind of organization that model that they were working in before.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's nail on the head. I think for us as well as a business, the CROs that we're partnered up with, we are having a lot more FSP conversations, whereas in the past it was, obviously a mix of full service and FSP, but it seems right now it is definitely more of a heavy focus on FSP. And the big conversation there is around process excellence, right?
Yeah.
How are these CROs and sponsors communicating? And is there a way to streamline that, right? Process improvement between those two companies to ensure, a successful partnership.
Yeah, I agree. And I think whenever people think about that, right, I think a lot of times it leans into people want to be over communicating, but I don't think it's that. I don't think you have a meeting to have a meeting, right? People need really to be really careful in this industry about that. It happens often when really I think rather than that, we don't come to a meeting to read an agenda to somebody. We come to a meeting to say, these are the trends I'm seeing. These are the things that I saw. Let's discuss if we believe that this changes the scope of what we were thinking about before in terms of this project. And even if it doesn't, let's come up with a solution. I've already brought 5, you bring 2, and let's talk about it here and move forward. I think the more that we can get in that model and be more efficient in our communication style, it means your study is more efficient, you're bringing things to market more efficiently, and you're finding ways in the data that it also can be more efficient. Are you looking at risk-based models? What are you looking at? What are you looking for, right? We're not just looking at raw data dumps anymore. We have so many tools that we don't have to. So let's not make our communication inefficient on the other side of it.
I'm dying to ask you, what is the language of data management and biometrics, and is that language universal?
Yeah, the greatest question of all time.
Yes, exactly.
So I love this question for a few reasons. One, I started this, it was a mentorship program for people who are new into the industry. And during that time, it was their first day, and I was so excited to meet them. I wanted to meet them, and I said, listen, I'm going to speak in a language to you right now that may or may not make sense today. But I promise you, there's going to be a day that I'm going to say all of these things, and you're going to know exactly what I just said. And so everyone kind of says, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? And so I said, listen, we're going to walk into an EDC PPC. And we're going to need to update the DRG and the DMP. And I want to make sure that at the end of the day that we have a good DBL. Okay, so we're just going to all be good and don't worry. And everyone looked at me like, what? Can you tell me that again? And then they would all come to me over time and say, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you were talking about. And so it's just so magnificent, right? Like over time, that language does become semi-universal because between different sponsors and different CROs, there's always a different acronym, right? There's always a slightly different thing, but we're all talking about the same thing. But it's a really interesting concept to kind of see people progress over time and understand that we're speaking the language of biometrics. We're talking about fieldoids, we're talking about SAS data sets, we're talking about all these acronyms, but they have such heavy meanings. And so the big thing for me is, how you communicate it. Look at people's face whenever you're just going on a diatribe of acronyms and make sure that you're all saying the same thing at the same time.
Thank you so much for sharing. But love for you to elaborate from your experience, the differences working across CROs, medical device, and essentially why does everyone want to work oversight for a sponsor?
It's an interesting dichotomy of like how do you get to the space that you want?
Yeah.
And I think some people run the CRO game for a really long time. They're in that market space. They love being at a CRO. They love the pivots and the shifts that you have to do all day. For some people, it really works. Other people they want to be more focused. They want to say, oh, this is the indication that I really love. And so I want to find a sponsor that I can really dive into and sit in that space for the rest of my career, the rest of time. Also, the reality is sometimes at the sponsor side, you're definitely in a space where you are overseeing different things. You're overseeing a lot more clinical spaces. You're overseeing a lot more vendors. You're doing a thing in a way that is going to have you kind of really focusing and harnessing all of your energy towards getting that drug to market in a different way than you are at the CRO, right? At the CRO, you're developing process plans. You're working through, but not just for one sponsor, potentially. It might be for a couple or a couple of different studies. And so it's a different mindset in terms of kind of where you are. Sponsor side can also be one that has a few more benefits. It can have perks that a CRO might not have in terms, maybe they have stock options, maybe they have the ability for you to have a bit more stock in the company and that sort of thing. So people can be really enticed by that. They might have different benefits and even healthcare benefits and all of those things. So I think people's mindset is typically whenever you've been at a CRO for a long time, they're like, I want to go to the sponsor side and start overseeing these CROs. You gain a ton of knowledge at a CRO, and it can be nice to then transition that to become a subject matter expert at a sponsor and vice versa. Sometimes people are at a sponsor and they're like, oh, I want more general industry experience. And so I want to gain that by kind of having these different opportunities that I wouldn't necessarily have on the sponsor.
Yeah. And I guess you can only know that if you've worked, would you say you can only really assess that if you've worked in a CRO sponsor? Or do you think people know right off the gate, like, oh, I only want to work for a sponsor, I only want to work for a CRO? Because I think what we say to our candidates is if you need to make a list, what's important to you? Make that list. What is important to you? Is it remote? Is it the stock options? Is it, you want to work for one indication? Like, what is it that's really important to you? I guess my question is, did you know right off the gate that you wanted to work for a CRO, or do people know they want to work for a sponsor?
Yeah, I think some people know in certain roles. There are some people who are like, hey, I'm a chemist and I really want to work on the sponsor side to, help with molecule development. They want to do that sort of thing. So they want to lean in on that way. I think other times in data management specifically, you don't always know. You might start to know over time where you think, oh, you know what, I'm becoming really close with the sponsor team that I'm working with, and I'm realizing that I'm kind of doing the tasks on their end as well as what I would do at a CRO. And I'm starting to realize that maybe that's the space that I really enjoy and I'm finding joy there, right? I think that's one thing whenever you make your list of what's on the list of things that you want happiness should be number one. Can we just say that, right? Like
100%, yes.
like what
Yes.
actually brings you joy? And sometimes it is the money that brings people joy, but I think that, what's the thing at the end of the day that keeps drawing you back in and not making it feel like you're going to work? And I think if you can find that thing, sponsor side or CRO side, you are going to be golden for so long. And I think that's the spot you should be looking for first, in my opinion.
People would love to hear, would love this advice, especially in the market that we're in, unfortunately. A lot of people are getting ghosted, both by recruiters, both by hiring managers. I think what people are kind of concerned about, maybe worried about and thinking about is like, what are these hiring managers looking for? I'm sending my resume, it's out there, I have everything, I have the experience, I have the years, I have worked in good companies, I've, worked throughout 15 years, haven't really kind of jumped around, or it's the perfect, what we call a grade A candidate, just a candidate that you want to send out, but I'm not hearing back. No one's coming back to me, and I have conversations like this every week. So as a hiring manager, when you look at a resume, what are you looking for that stands out, or that you're always like, oh, I need to see this in a resume?
Yeah, I would say in terms of data management, it's an interesting thing that happens whenever I look through resumes, right? Obviously, I need to know where you've worked in the past. That's part of it. If you're just joining the industry, it doesn't necessarily have where you have to be in data management anyway. You didn't have to, go to college, like I said before, for this role. You could have done something else, and we can still, sometimes you can get into the industry in a different way, which is great. It's really fun.
Yeah.
But I think if you're kind of been in the industry for a while, the thing that you have to be careful with your resume and data management is that you don't just copy your CV and you just put all of the things that were on your CV directly into kind of your resume. Because over time, if someone like myself was looking at 50 resumes and they all have the same first line because someone took their CRO experience and they took their job description and they just pasted it into their CV, and I see it 50 times, it's like, okay, I cannot figure out what is setting candidate A apart from candidate B. And so one thing that I tell people is don't hesitate to write information on your CV that does set you apart, that is very personal, that might have a couple of qualities that set you in. That's like, not only here's my job description that I'm pasting in, but I'm also going to let you know that, I had this challenge, or I was successful in this way, or I led this team, or I led this study. I think a lot of times people leave off those nitty gritty details that can really draw someone's eye in whenever they're like, oh, wait, I don't have to go into this interview and ask them if they've ever drafted a DMP before, because I see on their resume, it says right here that they were leading the charge for DMP templates and that they were the one updating and doing the drafts. And it also says that they did 10 of them last year. That's very impressive, right? And so sometimes adding granular level of detail items that will draw someone in will most likely get you the conversation that you want. And once you have it, don't be afraid to be vulnerable in your interview. That's the big thing I just want to tell people is whenever I'm talking with someone, if they're willing to say, oh my gosh, I'm nervous in this moment, great. Let's have a conversation. Let's relax together and do it together, right? But also, if they're just telling me like, this is my experience, and don't be afraid to say you don't have experience in something. I tell people all of the time that I would much rather hear in your interview that you have a gap for growth, which is more exciting for me to know that you're willing to learn something than fudging it a little bit and finding out later that it wasn't what we expected. It's far more exciting to say, oh, this is a gap for growth for me. I'm excited to learn this area, but I don't know it, is so much better than just being like, oh, sure, yep, I did that when you really didn't. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you brought up a really great point. I want to make it like a huge PSA in terms of the job description being copied on the resume. I see it far too often. And as a PSA to those listening to this interview, I've had clients actually reject candidates. The client gets the CV, it's a job description. That's the end of the conversation, not even a first interview. So for those out there, exactly what Amanda said, put your experience out there, definitely, and especially in this market, it will make you stand out. And that is so critical.
And I think the other thing that's really like kind of valuable advice for people is when I hear it all of the time is that, oh, I have to talk to this recruiter today. right?
Yes.
Like that is your first opportunity to make an impression. Do not let one opportunity pass you by whenever you are looking for a job. It's like, wow, everyone at every step. Never give one part of the process a toss aside because you just never know who you're actually talking to. So.
I thank you for saying that because I think that is so important. And not because as a recruiter that I'm going to be like, oh, yes, that's so true. Like, you need to be nice to us. I get it. Like, I get you're getting ghosted. I get it's bad out there. Like, I absolutely we understand. We see it every day.
Yes.
But if you're speaking to me and you're giving me one word, answers, and you're just like, or being rude, it's like, how am I then going to be able to send you and be like, oh, no, you're not going to be rude to the hiring manager? The hiring manager might come back to me and be like, Khulud, why did you send me this person? Do you know what I mean? And I think I get how frustrated people are with recruiters, and there is some recruiters out there that unfortunately have probably not done a good job and have left people on red. And I also understand from recruiters' perspective, like they get so many emails, so many resumes, and it's really hard to keep up with everything. But do what you can to respond to people. But I think that's spot on. Like every person that you speak to throughout the process, just, unfortunately, yes, you're going to have to repeat yourself multiple times.
Yes.
But that's just the name of the game. Like you have to be able to speak to as many people as possible to get the role that you want.
Let's bring in like personal approach to everything we do, even if it's just bumping into someone, even if it's an interview, you don't actually know who you're talking to and who they know the first time. So this recruiter might not have the job you want today, or this company might not have the job you want today, but they might have it a month from now or 6 months from now. And if you're passing them off, the moment that you meet them, it's like you've kind of set yourself back already.
So I guess on the flip side, Amanda, you've been a hiring manager, hiring candidates. When you're working or want to work with an agency or recruitment company like ourselves, what is it that you look for when deciding, okay, this is the agency I want to work with, or this is the recruiter I'd like to work with?
Yeah, I think part of it is the same as what I'm looking for in a candidate. I'm looking for someone that stands out, who's willing to do the digging, right? I need someone who can bring me the information that we're not doubling up on all the efforts. Because for me, I'm a hiring manager who's quite a bit busy. And so I need someone that I know I can trust. I can trust your opinion. You can tell me exactly what I'm looking for. If I give you a list of questions, that you're really asking the candidates those questions and doing exactly what you said, right? Which is creating a list for me so I'm not then sifting through every single candidate myself, but rather I get to have someone who has the same mindset that I do going into it. You know exactly what I want, and you're willing to go out there and find it for me, or at least find 20 people for me to be able to decide for myself. But I think that ground level work that a kind of agency is willing to do for a hiring manager is so beneficial, and really sourcing. I think if you can dig in with a candidate and really get their personality to come out and really understand them in a way that's going to be the same way that I would, that's exactly what I need and what I want.
Yeah, and I think that's on. I know we said we spent 30, 40 minutes speaking to candidates to understand what they want. For us on the flip side, it's exactly the same. It's 40, 45 minutes of a job briefing. And I know hiring managers most of the time don't have that, but it's like that's the only 45 minutes I'm going to need from you. And you're going to tell me exactly what you want, and I'm going to go out and get you that. I'm not going to get you something similar. I'm not going to get you something that's close to that. We're going to get you exactly what you want, and we're not going to bombard you with resumes that you could have gotten yourself from LinkedIn. We're going to get you people that you're probably not going to find yourself just because, they're not actively looking, or they're just not the type of people to respond to a LinkedIn message. Dive into our network and really get you what you want. So yeah, I think that's definitely kind of spot on when it comes to us, when it comes to, working with hiring managers. I think that's it from us. We really appreciate your time, Amanda. We're really excited to have this conversation with you. I think this is going to help a lot of people, and I hope a lot of people do listen to it, especially all the advice, because I think not people don't have the opportunity to kind of sit and talk to like directors and of clinical data management and get advice on, the market. So yeah, thank you so much.